The Maqasid ash-Shari'ah are the ghayat, are the overarching aims, the ends that the Sharia seeks to realize, or another word for it is asrar, the secrets. The objective the lawgiver has placed. Fiqh is knowledge, معرفة الأحكام الشرعية العملية, knowledge of actions that have been derived from adilla tafsiliyya, the detailed evidences.
But Maqasid doesn't seem to be doing any of that. It's more of, these are the big things that you need to know. In general, we know that Islam is about benefiting people. So everything that would be derived would be about benefit. But in that, would we miss the point, Sheikh, sometimes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is, now it depends on whose theory of Maqasid and whose manhaj of Maqasid we're looking at.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Today, it's a very special show. We have with us an amazing scholar, an amazing teacher, someone who, when you see his background, the kind of work the man has done, it's an honor to be able to interview and to learn from such scholars of this ummah. We have today with us a very special guest, Dr. Chowdhury. Many of you may have read his books. He's written books such as Islamic Theology and Problem of Evil. He's done a PhD on Abdul Rahman al-Sulami, which is known as a very from Sufi background. He's writing now on epistemology and knowledge, the study of knowledge. He's an amazing academic. He's written on Arabia, the Arba'in of Shah Waliullah Dahlavi, as many of you know, Shah Waliullah, the role that he has played in India, and of course as a scholar of Hadith. And also he's translated books like Fiqh al-Buyu'. So it's this is just some of his work. You can go and check him out in his background and things like this. Today, though, the discussion will be on al-Maqasid, Maqasid al-Shari'ah. What does it mean? How does, when we talk about the principles that extract these maqasid, where did they come from? Why do we need to study them? What is the difference between maqasid and usul al-fiqh, for instance, and the stance or the understanding of different scholars regarding these two, of course, in this case, maqasid, and also those, maybe we'll discuss some of the sciences of, the sources of Islamic law, and a lot more details of this, inshallah. So with that, Dr. Chowdhury, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Wallahi, it's an honor. Honor is all mine.
No, Sheikh. May Allah protect and preserve you and raise your status in the dunya and the akhirah. It's a lot. It's amazing. MashaAllah, that subhanallah, we have amazing sons and daughters of this ummah that are so dedicated to learning this deen and give their time, their wealth, their lives, to do this type of work.
But the amazing thing is the work that you're doing, being a mu'assis, a founder of what you do. And I think I'm sure you've been told this, the impact that it's having on the community.
Inshallah, Sheikh, that because we bring scholars. People like you. That's why it's having an impact. MashaAllah. So let's begin this discussion, Sheikh.
Tawfiq in the work, I think.
Tawfiq, Sheikh. May Allah accept it from all of us, inshallah, Rabbil Alameen. I am really actually excited to have this discussion, Sheikh. Because it's also, of course, because I'm speaking to you and you know your stuff, and this is a chance for us to actually learn from our scholars. Sheikh, let's go into this topic, Maqasid Sharia. It's a topic that is discussed a lot, at least with what I understand now, more in the last 19th and the 20th, 21st century, then maybe beyond that, it wasn't as known of a subject. would it be right to say that people focus more on the issues of usul fiqh than the issues of maqasid, or what this means? I mean, I guess that's the we can discuss this. What? Why is this science becoming so much more famous than, let's say, even usul fiqh, Sheikh?
Oh, all right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Like I was saying, Sayyidi Muhammad, your work, Allah bless it. Continue it, you and your team. And may Allah protect you and the work that you do. And make it go from strength to strength.
Ameen ya Rabb.
So I think the question you ask is important. I mean, it's a historical thing. Why the shift to a kind of Maqasid approach? I think one obvious answer people will find is, what they call pre-modern usul, or usul before modernity. They saw that as very sort of literalist and textualist, like you look at nas, you look at text and you read it literally and you derive hukum, or it's very inflexible, and a lot of people felt the rigidity is like a hindrance to new problems. So when Muslims encountered modernity, some of them sensed that the old usul method is too stringent, it's too constrictive. So we need to be a bit more. We need to have a bit more encompassing. We need to, maybe instead of looking at the details of the law, the minutiae, why don't we look at the broader sort of philosophy or concepts or ideas behind the law? The jurist is so bogged down in details, they miss the woods from the trees. So maybe we need to get a more bigger picture, bird's eye view of the Sharia, and look at deriving ruling in that way. So that was one of the concerns ulama had at the 18th, or late 18th, early 19th, and early 20th century. They wanted to look at ways to try and make the Sharia expansive, to be able to solve new problems without being so rigid, because they saw the earlier fiqh of the madhahib has been very rigid. It's kind of simplistic way of putting it, but that's one reason. The other reason, I think, especially now in the 21st century, but it was taking place more throughout the 20th, mid-20th, late 20th century, is, Maqasid, as we'll hopefully maybe unpack a bit, it really fits well with a kind of consequentialist idea of law, like looking at the outcomes and consequences of law. And, that when you're looking at the consequences of law, not the details of law, the minutiae, you can see that kind of idea being attractive. And so a consequentialist idea of law, maqasid, they seem to pair quite well. So you have that idea. It just happens to be a crossing of two trends of thinking, And because in the old pre-modern fiqh, if you look at the definition of, fiqh is al-ilmu بأحكام الشرعية العملية المستنبطة من أدلتها التفصيلية. Fiqh is knowledge, معرفة أحكام الشرعية العملية, knowledge of actions that have been derived from أدلة تفصيلية, the detailed evidences. Now that takes, a different type of training to go to the detailed evidences to bring out hukum. Why do that when you can look at deriving hukum from maybe the broader goals of the Sharia, or looking at the consequences of actions and things like that?
Sheikh,
we have that ma'alatul af'al. We have that.
I was because we're going to continue on this. It's just I was wondering, would that be same as standardization of the law? What happened at the end of the Ottoman century? Would that? I mean, I guess it could be a wrong comparison, but were they trying to I mean, for instance, you have different madahib. And you have the Hanafis and Shafi'is and Malikis and Hanbalis and Laythis and all of that. At the end of the day, they had principles upon which the school laid out its understanding, and then, but Maqasid doesn't seem to be doing any of that. It's not laying down the law in that way. It's more of, these are the big things that you need to know. And for instance,
Yes.
example would be, Allah is merciful. So look, in general, we know that Islam is about benefiting people. So let's just, so everything that would be derived would be about benefit. But in that,
Yeah.
would we miss the point, Sheikh, sometimes? Because there is also punishment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, now it depends on whose theory of maqasid and whose manhaj of maqasid we're looking at. Maybe, those who are students of Sharia would know, those who are students of Islamic law would know that the contemporary literature in Maqasid of Sharia is huge.
Right. Yeah, it is.
It's very expansive. I'll try and, inshallah, today maybe give some sort of pointers and some basic concepts and ideas. But yeah, we're going to see whether Maqasid, some people looked at Maqasid, can it really be, from its nature, as we'll come to describe, can it be a source of law? There's one objection. Yeah, there's objections about, is it something from which you can derive hukum shari'i? From the idea of the Maqasid itself, from the nature of what Maqasid are they like misuse from which you can derive hukum shari'i, Islamic rulings? And for some, it's not. It's not like a nas. Like
it's overarching. It's an overarching.
Yeah, they look
understanding.
Yeah. Yes.
But
goals.
What? So where would qiyas go? I mean, I know I'm asking a bit detailed questions here, but so what would happen to usul fiqh? Let me ask you that. If maqasid is taken as the source of law, which I obviously I don't accept it, but
the question then becomes is, as a methodology to derive law, is it robust? That's one question to think about. Is it robust enough?
Right. Because that's what usul fiqh did.
Yeah, usul, I think, in my opinion, the classical usul, like the pre-modern usul or the former dhahib, the usul is extremely robust. And then we want to look at is the application then of maqasid. Does maqasid end up unraveling other aspects of the law? Does it end up obviating or almost...
What would be robust, Sheikh? One example before we go on. What is robust as far as usul fiqh? One example.
Yeah, it's got to be
that we may not get from the maqasid, for instance.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the classical usul, what I mean by robust is it's not generic principles. Can you see? It's not just generic principles like, we can derive law from just by looking at the general principles of something. Can you see it? They're not just broad principles from which you then trying to derive detailed law. Rather, we're looking at legal principles that have been extracted by careful thinking, and they are strong enough. They are theoretically strong enough to use to understand the text to derive ruling. So you got to remember, we're looking at hadith and the Quran. These are texts that are a closed corpus. They are a closed corpus. No one can come along and add a new hadith, right? They can't create a new hadith, right? Nobody can come along and add an ayah, right? It's kufr. You got your parameters, and these become your texts. So now you need a hermeneutic, a way of interpreting these texts that is rigorous and not just generic and vague and broad to cover anything and to allow anything to be derived. They got to be, when I mean robust, I mean really precise, clear, well defined, rigorous. So things like that. If I say, for example, such and such thing is haram, because in Islam there's a general principle that we shouldn't harm, that might not always be, that might not always get me to the correct ruling. I need to have sufficient number of principles so I can understand the text in a comprehensive way. This is what I mean by robust. You know, it's strong, it's theoretically placed, it's comprehensive, it's detailed, it's commensurate with the text. So the principles that you derive for your usul are congruent with the text that you're studying. So you're not going to use principles of, you know, English language to try and understand Islamic texts, are you? That won't be congruent principles because it's the Arabic language. So you have to have principles that are congruent with the Arabic language, valid principles of reasoning, and things like that. So this is what I mean by robust. When you open up any usul book, you know what a hukum is, how to define a hukum, who's the mahkum alayh, who's the hakim, isn't it? What is hukum shari'i? What's the definition? So I need to know what ruling is, what are the types of hukum taklifi, hukum wad'i. These are theoretical categories, but they're very precise in delineating or mapping out categories of the law. Who does it apply to? Who's the lawgiver? And so on and so on. This is what I mean by robust.
Now, let me one more thing here, Sheikh. So now, for instance, if a scholar like Imam Shafi'i or let's say if he adds something, let's say called istihsan in his usul, Sheikh, is that because something lacked and then he or he just wanted to add that to make it more robust?
Imam Shafi'i didn't add istihsan. Of course, he's very critical.
Yeah.
Imam Abu Hanifa. Yeah.
Istidlal, I think, is Imam.
Oh, right. Yeah. So in terms of well,
see, I guess what I'm trying to ask is that will Maqasid ever give you that type of ability to make sure that it's so precise and it's with proofs?
Well, what you start to see in the Maqasid literature is Maqasid theory becoming very, very elaborate. And some say it's almost falling prey to the rigidity that they accuse the other usul of the madhahibs. Can you see? It's becoming so elaborate and theoretical, the Maqasid, some Maqasid theories. So it's almost defeating the purpose of being broad and generic. You see? So it all depends on whose Maqasid al-Shari'ah we're talking about. Whose Maqasid, theory of Maqasid, Nadariyatul Maqasid. Whose account or model are we talking about? So and that's obviously a rarefied academic matter. You've got scholars differing over the details and the precision.
So an example.
How fine, the way I put it is, how finely grained is one's Maqasid theory?
So let me ask you, Sheikh, now, for instance, I mean, there are those who criticize Maqasid and they say, well, look, Maqasid can never become, these are general principles of what Islamic law does, right? I mean, it protects religion, it protects lineage, it protects, honor, all of these things. But now...
So you're asking, why is it so important?
I'm not just like it's important because it lays out these things, but at the same time, how can it be abused? Only because the price, how precise usul is, it doesn't seem to be that precise when it comes to Maqasid.
Yeah, well, definitely we'll have to get examples. I mean, But before I do say that, though, I think it's important for me to say, I think nobody can just deny there are Maqasid, for example, of the Sharia. I don't think no one denies there are people who are critical of it. But I mean, look, I want to mention some statements that are wonderful from the ulama about Maqasid, and it's not something to sort of throw on the wayside. So Imam ash-Shatibi, rahimahullah, he's considered to be the architect of this approach
Right.
of maqasid, the aims or purposes or higher purposes of Sharia. And he says, إن وضع الشرائع إنما هو لمصالح العباد في العاجل والآجل معا. So he says the law has placed benefit for people in this. The law has placed benefit for people in this life and in the next. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, he said, wallahi, it's a lovely statement. And then I'll give the statement of Hujjat al-Islam, which I think is brilliant. He says, من فهم حكمة الشارع كان هو الفقيه حقا. So whoever understands the wisdom behind the law, the maqasid, he is the true jurisconsult, he is the true faqih. But Hujjat al-Islam, Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he says it wonderfully. And I think this is quoted by Imam al-Suyuti. He says, مقاصد الشرع قبلة المجتهدين من توجه جهة منها أصاب الحق. The maqasid is the qibla of the mujtahid. Whoever faces it, whoever turns towards it, he will surely attain the truth. So the ulama, the maqasid is there. The maqasid is important. But you're right, of course, like with any concept or idea, of course it can be abused. So for our viewers or listeners, the maqasid of Sharia are, it comes from the compound of maqasid and Sharia, these two sort of Arabic compound words. So maqsad in Arabic can mean, being like on a straight. It comes from the root like qasd, to be on a straight way. And Allah mentions that in the Quran. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ قَصْدُ السَّبِيلِ. And it's on Allah alone to clearly show people the way. Maqasid also comes from, the meaning of being moderate. Like iqtisad, this is where the word iqtisad comes from. Allah mentions this in the Quran. وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ. Some of them followed the middle course. And Sharia, of course, is law, revelation, a way, things like that. So the maqasid of Sharia, in a linguistic sense, is a construct between the word maqsad, aim, and then Sharia, what we generally translate as Islamic law. But there are some technical definitions, and I think it might be important to mention some of them so people get an idea of what we mean by maqasid of Sharia. Now, the maqasid of Sharia are defined in a few ways. So Imam Tahir ibn Ashur, the great Tunisian scholar, for example, who's one of the pioneers of contemporary maqasid, he talks about maqasid al-Sharia al-amma, and he says هي المعاني والحكم الملحوظة للشارع في جميع أحوال التشريع ومعظمها بحيث لا يختص ملاحظاتها بالكون في نوع خاص من أحكام الشرعية. The maqasid al-Sharia, the general sort of laws, the general laws of the Sharia are like meanings and considerations that the legislator, the Sharia, gives when he legislates. So what is it that's in the legislator's sort of broad aims when he legislates? And it may not be for every specific hukum, but it's for the broader law in general. The great people say Allal al-Fasi, one of the other sort of pioneers of maqasid, he says al-murad bil maqasid al-Sharia al-ghaya منها والأسرار التي وضعها الشارع عند كل حكم من أحكامها. This, I think, is the standard meaning everyone's got in their mind, that the maqasid al-Sharia are the ghayat, are the overarching aims, the ends that the Sharia seeks to realize, or another word for it is asrar, the secrets. التي وضعها الشارع, the objective the lawgiver has placed. عند كل حكم من أحكامها, for each and every ruling. So these, you get other definitions. الغايات التي وضعت الشريعة لأجل تحقيقها لمصلحة العباد. Imam Sheikh Raisuni Hafidhullah mentioned that. And many scholars have given this definition. So what we start to see about Maqasid, and I think this is important here for people to understand, Maqasid becomes a theory of law that is looking at the wisdom behind the law, the masalih, so the wisdom's the hikam, and the masalih, the benefits behind the law, and Allah's consideration of maslahah, of benefit, or noting benefit when He's legislating the Sharia. So already we've got Maqasid al-Sharia is about the lawgiver legislating the Sharia for the benefit of humankind, and that these benefits the Sharia seeks to materialize. So that in broad strokes is what the Maqasid al-Sharia is. The broader higher aims, the broader ends, ghayat. So that's the kind of bird's eye picture of the law. And so from that then it becomes, well, what do you do with this bird's eye view of the law? Do you make it a source of law? Can it be a source of law? Or do you make it like a regulating parameter? Like, do you look at it as like a boundary which the mujtahid or the faqih needs to consider the broader picture when they're trying to derive hukum? When they're doing ijtihad, is it something that they should consider as, as part of the broader picture of the Sharia? Some people say, you if you don't see the whole picture, then you're going to lose sight of where certain things fit in, where certain ahkam fit into the overall picture.
Sheikh, for instance, now, Maslah Mursala, this idea itself, let's say, I mean, this, let me give you the examples that, I mean, that are given here sometimes, and then it could be, that's, what I mean by abusing the law sometimes. Sheikh, let's say, for instance, to look at the benefit as the overarching issue is benefit, for instance. Now, when, for instance, voting, a lot of people quote, they go with Maqasid, then they'll say, you see, this is an issue of benefit in general, and then somehow they try to say that voting in a system that is kufr, for instance, is allowed, because they'll quote Maqasid. Is that possible?
Well, we'll have to look at the thing is, so if we see, every principle has dawabit, they have governing, controlling factors. But you can't just apply a rule anyhow you want. There's constraints around the rule that the fuqaha lay down, like almost like not conditions, but the ways to help you apply the principle. So it cannot just be that a maslaha, a something that's beneficial, can suddenly override other aspects of the Sharia. You see, so if you think that when you look at the reality, so we've got to look at the reality, for example, of what voting means or what it involves. What is the manat behind voting? So when you vote for a secular party or an individual, what are you in effect doing? Right? So we need to get to the nature of that. So when you're voting for someone, are you endorsing things that are un-Islamic, for example? So is it just the case that a blanket maslaha will override all these other considerations? Many scholars would probably say no. It's not just, you can't just bring maslaha and say, look, there's a benefit, a general benefit, therefore we can do we We can do the impermissible, which is supporting or giving our consent to supporting things that the Sharia will consider munkarat. You see, like legislating and things like that. So it's not just a matter of then bringing maslahah, general maslahah, and saying, based on general maslahah, we can then say this is allowed. The question then is, how did you ascertain the maslahah? That needs to be asked first of all, right? How did you ascertain the maslahah?
Sure.
How did you decide that it was a maslahah in the first place? Because many people can bring in many things under maslahah amma. You can do bid'ah if you just use maslahah amma. But yet, you can't just invent something and say it's okay just because it's got benefit for the community or something like that. So we've got to be careful when the person uses maslahah. Is it valid to use for in effect doing things that are munkarat? You see, so we have to look at someone's specific reasoning to say why.
Would they still have to go back? Is usul al-fiqh still the framework behind the maqasid? Would they still? I mean, it seems like they would still have to go back and look at, meaning for the validity of a principle in maqasid. Let's say, because scholars can add things to what the maqasid are. I mean, you have 5, some have said 6, some have said 7. When they do this, Sheikh, I mean, do they still go back to usul fiqh and then the sources of law? How do they?
They do.
So they
again,
do
it also depends. Yeah. Of course, anyone who subscribes to a theory of maqasid, they haven't left kitabs, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas. The question is how, depending on the author and the proponent, how much of the maqasid are they embedding in their usul? For some, for example, Maqasid ash-Shari'ah is just, you got Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas, and any other principles that someone holds, istihsan, istislah, sadd al-dhari'ah, whatever other extra principles are out there. And then what they do is they go to these sources for hukm shari'i, but they use the maqasid as a broader sort of thing in the background. You see, it's not they're not going to go there directly first. They're just aware that there are parameters to Islamic law.
How
there are
the
some
principles
overarching aims. Yeah. So they may not use it as a source of law. Some, though, will build it in as a source of law. They would use the maqasid as a basis for deriving hukm shari'i. Others will place it in different parts of their theory. So it depends how much is embedded in the legal jurisprudence of a person. And that varies. And that's varied considerably. So it all depends, I guess, whose individual that way. Look, so so the individual we're talking about. So for example, I don't want any viewers to think there's no arguments for like the maqasid as a theory. Like there are some evidences people bring. So for example, so we talked about the meaning or the ta'rif, the definition of maqasid sharia earlier. People give some evidence, textual and naqli and aqli, for the existence of maqasid in the Quran and Hadith. So, for example, some people give the evidence that, look, many places in the Quran, Allah says He's al-Hakim, right? He's wise, Jalla wa ala. And so, if He's al-Hakim, he wouldn't act in ways that are wanton or aimless or pointless, arbitrary. That shows like lack of wisdom. So wisdom means putting things in the rightful place and not abath, not aimless. Not it's not like for no reason. And so people say, look, it's not possible for Allah to be wise and not produce legislation that reflects that wisdom. Yeah. So his kalam will be reflective of his hikmah. It wouldn't be wisdomless. So Another evidence some people bring, for example, is Allah's. It's mentioned in the hadith. It's mentioned in the Surah Al-A'raf, I think it is. Allah says, وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. My mercy encompasses all things. Some ulama say, look, if Allah is merciful, then He created the creation with mercy and compassion. And if He's created them with mercy and compassion, then His Shari'ah, His legislation must reflect that mercy and compassion. Hafiz ibn al-Qayyim is very, very clear on this. He says, فَتَعْطِيلُ لِحِكْمَتِهِ جَلَّ وَعَلَى والغاية المقصودة التي لأجلها يفعل إنكار لرحمته في الحقيقة. He says that nullifying Allah's wisdom and the intended purpose for why He acts in reality is to deny Allah's mercy. So Allah acts and brings legislation out of His rahmah. So His wisdom and His mercy is reflected in His revelation. Other people say there's Maqasid in the Sharia because of the language of the Arabic language. So, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ.
لعلكم تتقون, being there.
Yeah. لَعَلَّ here is like, Allah.
So these, when you say لعلكم تتقون, would that become an illah?
No, ulama don't say illah here because it's the maqsad behind fasting, which is to gain taqwa.
No.
Now, why did some ulama differentiate between it? Because illah, just to be specific, illah is the cause of a hukum. It's the reason why لِأَجْلِ وُضِعَ الْحُكُمْ. It's the reason why hukum came in. So if the illah is there, the hukum will be there. If A, then B. If not A, then not B. So if the illah is not there, the hukum won't be there, won't be applied. This is not the case for like a maqsad, an aim. A maqsad is a ghaya, an aim that the Sharia seeks to realize or not realize. Many people fast, for example, and they get their taqwa out of it. كم من صائم ليس من صيامه إلا الجوع والعطش. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, how many people fast? All they get is hunger and thirst in their bellies, right? So لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, the maqsad of it is for you to fast. Perhaps you may attain, I think in some English translation, the hope is, the aim is you get taqwa, but you may not. And this may or may not indicates that it's a maqsad, it's not an illah. So some people say that's the evidence for there being maqasid in the Sharia, the language, the Arabic language. And then some people base it on like the verses of the Quran where Allah mentions.
Sheikh, before you mention the next thing, when we talk about usul, I'm trying to differentiate everything that you're saying in my head. So when we talk about usul al-fiqh here, it is the Arabic language that caused the ulama to come up with these principles anyway. Yes or no? Right? Would that be correct to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then, if okay, so I guess my following question was then why need for maqasid? But then I guess because you answered it in the beginning, saying that that was the overarching instead of the rigidity.
Yeah.
Okay, so now for the student of knowledge, Sheikh, how should they take this study of maqasid? Let's say.
I think they should. Of course, they should consider it and look at it. Maqasid al-Sharia. If you see it, ulama, some people who say when you're studying ijtihad, you need to know the Maqasid al-Sharia. Like the mujtahid should be aware of the Maqasid al-Sharia. So some people who espouse the Maqasid approach, they say, for example, that the objective of the Sharia, all the objectives, and I'll mention some of them in a second, the objectives of the Sharia must be there in the mujtahid's mind so that ijtihad is accurate. So, for example,
framework.
Yeah. So in his Hashiyat al-Muwafaqat, the text of Muwafaqat of Imam ash-Shatibi, Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, rahimahullah, he says, أما بالنسبة للمجتهد بوجه خاص فإن عليه أن يحدد المقصد الشرعي في حكم كل مسألة على حده. ليش؟ ليتمكن من تبين صحة أو دقة اندراجها في المقاصد العامة للتشريع التي اتجهت جملة التكاليف إلى تحقيقها اعتبارا للجزء بالكلي، وهذا لون من الجهد العقلي الاجتهادي. So what he says is, the mujtahid is incumbent on him to determine the objective, the legal objective, al-maqsad al-shari'i, in the hukm of every mas'ala separately. Why? So he can clarify the accuracy or precision of a hukm in the broader picture of the Islamic legislation. So when you look at a hukm, you need to know how is it placed in the overall structure or configuration of the Sharia. This is why he says, اعتبارا للجزء بالكلي, in light of the particular, in light of the general. And he says, وهذا لون من الجهد العقلي الاجتهادي, and this is a form of intellectual and juristic effort. Yeah. So you can see how the mujtahid, when he's deriving hukm, many people said you need to know the hukm in its place, in its broader place. Now, do you then nullify the hukm that you derived if it goes against a broader maqsad, or ulama disagree over this?
I was going to ask you that, because that could occur.
It could occur. That depends on how much you take the Maqasid al-Shari'ah in your theory. How much are you hugging on to it in your theory?
So, Sheikh, where is the balance of this? I mean, when you say in your theory, does that mean... so it would actually mean how well versed the person is actually in usul and the Arabic language?
I mean, are you asking how?
Meaning, if there is a contradiction, for instance, okay, well, in general, this is the framework, but after the ijtihad, it comes out to be, yani, not what I was thinking. Meaning, I guess that does the Arabic. Okay, so in general, Sheikh, when we are doing, when the mujtahid is he's extracting, or when he's looking at the sources, is the Arabic language playing the most important role, or is it the usul?
No, yeah. So an usul is a set of principles derived from the lugha, the language,
of course,
derived from general principles of reasoning, inference rules,
which the language allows in this case.
Sorry?
Which the language would allow in this case also.
Yeah, the language would allow, but some may bring in sort of intellectual inferences as well. But what the language may allow, the scope of the language. These then become, and obviously you have your own theological background as well, like your concepts about Allah Azza wa Jal and reality and your epistemology and things like that. You come with all this to texts, and you try and look for what is a hukm based on these principles. Which ones do you think apply? And then you bring them to bear on reading the ayat and the hadith. Now, in that reading, do you put maqasid at the forefront, or is maqasid just hovering in the background? And you see, that depends on the scholar. For some people, they say you have to. Some of the proponents of maqasid, it's what's known as al-maqasid al-ijtihadi, the maqasid type of ijtihad. Then
also, you're saying this is only when it's happening. Okay, so let me get this right. In maqasid in general, you are looking at trying to get the broader picture. You're not trying to get the minute details.
you definitely should be looking at the broader picture. That's your concern for sure.
Okay,
You may
so
not be. You're still concerned with finding the hukum, but it might. But you lose sight of the broader picture if you don't have the maqasid in mind. Can you see? So, because, for example, Al-Khadimi mentions in Al-Ijtihad Al-Maqasidi, العمل بمقاصد الشريعة والالتفات إليها والاعتماد بها في عملية الاجتهاد الفقهي. This is what he says Ijtihad al-Maqasid is, that you act according to the objectives of the Sharia, paying attention to them and considering them in the process of your ijtihad. So you're putting it in as part of your reading of the text and to derive hukum.
Wow,
you see? Yeah. So whereas traditionally, if you look at the ta'rif of ijtihad in the classical usul, maqasid isn't part of the definition.
Yes.
It's ijtihad is, badl al-wus'.
Sheikh,
see?
Continue.
Yeah. Afwan, sorry, Sheikh.
No, so Sheikh, when did this I guess the need for this science occurred when? Has it always been there? Meaning in the... Okay, let me put it this way.
It's always been there.
When the Sahaba were discussing this. Okay, yes, so that's what I'm trying to figure out. Was this something inferred in general? They were referring it to, they understood it, but it wasn't on paper. Yeah,
I mean, a lot of the books on Maqasid, they do say that the Sahaba use Maqasid. There's an application of the Maqasid by the Sahaba, and they give examples of Jam' al-Quran, compiling the Quran, things like that. So, so you're going to get that interpretation.
So do we see that in Ijma, Sheikhi? I mean, Maqasid, would that be part of Ijma too? Can somebody look at Ijma Sahaba and say that was, can somebody look at that and say, I mean, in general, we see Maqasid. I mean, I guess all of this is intellectual framework that's going on.
Yeah, I have no problem with someone bringing a new usul, but we have to look at the usul. I have no problems with that. Usul is a dynamic discipline. No one has a monopoly over usul, right? No one can say that there's only 4 usuls and no other usul can ever be created ever again or put together ever again. And that's true. We have to see whether the usul, brings out the results that it seeks. Does it have its own coherency? And 2, does it bring about the outcomes that the usul is seeking, i.e. deriving hukum ash-Shari'i, can you see, and deriving it accurately. So that's another discussion, isn't it, within usul al-fiqh, to what extent then is the maqasid, as I said at the beginning, robust enough, or is it just to be left at being the broad, encompassing parameter of the Sharia, rather than being adilla tafsiliyah, rather than being a specific evidence. So look, we can't deny, I think, that I personally anyway can't deny that the Sharia has come with aims. And I think most people know that the aims of the Sharia via istiqra', via inductive survey, are 5, and they're like hifzul deen, protection of the religion, hifzul nafs, protection of life, فالعقل فالنسب فالمال فالعرض. So preserving religion, life, intellect, your lineage, your property, and your honor. You find this in the books of fiqh and usul. However, so if someone was to survey the Sharia, are these the only 5 that the Sharia has come with? Other scholars have added more on, and I would agree, there's not only 5. There's not only 5. For example, the Palestinian jurist Sheikh Taqiyuddin al-Nabhani added an extra 3. He added حفظ الدولة, حفظ الأمن, حفظ كرامة الإنسانية. He added 3 more. And in fact, even people have added even more. So that's a total of 8.
Yeah,
other people added more. Exactly. I would say, you've got Maqasid al-Shari'ah, like, for example, you got the Maqasid al-Kubra, you can say are إقامة العدل, establishing justice, وتحكيم الشريعة, implementing the Sharia, الرحمة, عبادة, هداية, بيان الأحكام. So you got the إقامة العدل, establishing justice. I think this is the maqsad of the Sharia, without a doubt. I think تحكيم الشريعة, implementation of the Sharia, is a maqsad of the Sharia. The aim of the Sharia is to have itself implemented, not sitting in our heads. Implementation of mercy, making sure worship, ibadah, is established, making sure guidance is established, making sure ahkam is clarified. This is the maqsad of the Sharia. And I would go even further, and I would argue, and something maybe we can take up another time. I believe the Sharia objectives cannot be realized without the system that Allah gave it to be established, and that's the Khilafah. That's my view. I believe that the Sharia objectives requires the existence of an authoritative system that will comprehensively implement all the ahkam, which means implementing all the maqasid. In the absence of this authoritative system, the maqasid won't even be established. I don't think a secular state can implement the maqasid of the Sharia, the ones that I just mentioned, for example. Let's take the classical maqasid. I don't think any secular nation state will be able to implement that. So anyway, that's a separate discussion. Allah knows best on that.
So there could be obviously different schools within how the madahib, how the maqasid are understood.
Yeah, I don't know why people are only restricted to 5. This is my personal opinion. I guess why, they think these are the universal, abiding, absolute, the absolute 5, the inviolable 5. And I don't think that's the case. I just don't think you can't claim ijma' on that. I just, there cannot be, in my opinion. I'm sorry about that. I'm very weak in this topic, but I don't think there's only 5. I think more, if we do istiqra', you can derive them. As I said, some said there was 8. حفظ النفس, حفظ الدين, حفظ المال, حفظ العقل, حفظ النسل, حفظ الدولة, حفظ الأمن, حفظ الكرامة الإنسانية, and then a few more to add. إقامة العدل, تحكيم الشريعة, so on and so on. So you're right, Sheikh. I think it shouldn't be restricted to 5. Some people say originally حفظ العرض, honor, was added afterwards. You see? That's another discussion for
Sheikh.
Imam Shawkani mentions that some scholars added a 6th. And he mentions that in Ishad al-Fuhul. He mentions that. Then you've got the complication of which maqsad comes first, because you need tarjihat here, isn't it? Preference.
So Sheikh,
some ulama say deen is the most.
How do they take? How are they prioritized?
Well, it depends. This is where you get into a subject which I think many people have not been able to study properly, and this is ilm al-qara'in, the science of contextual indication. Yeah, qarina, that's right. When you choose one thing over another, when you give preference of one thing over another, you can't just make it up and choose it yourself. That's bringing your hawa into it. You need qarina to say why one is more superior than another. You see? So you need to have some kind of indication to point you to one over the other. So some people might argue Hifzuddin is the most important maqsad of the Sharia. Because religion is the most important thing. And then they get evidences from, why religion is the deen is so important. So apostasy, for example, in Sharia, in the classical reading, loss of life results, forfeiting your life. Abandoning Islam means forfeiting your life. But in Sharia, you're not allowed to take your life. You can see, you're not allowed to normally take a life, right? Because life is sacred, it's serious. Illa bil haqq. But Allah has given you a haqq in one instance to take someone's life, and that is when they do apostasy. So therefore, this must be something greater then. You see, that act of apostasy must be so serious that Allah allows a life to be taken for it. You see? So some put hifzuddin, preserving your deen, your iman, is greater.
That's how, so that, subhanAllah. Sheikh, this issue here, for instance, this question I have to ask before. I'm going to read something to you from, it says here, in Usul al-Fiqh al-Islami, I guess this is volume 2, could be. It refers to the meaning of objectives noted in all or most of its ruling, or it is the purpose of the Sharia and the secrets, wisdoms that the legislator has placed in each of its ruling. I think you mentioned that in the beginning. Now, from these definitions, we start to understand the core components of Maqasid al-Shari'ah as a theory of law. And then it gives us causes, yani ilal. Sheikh, what is the difference here between what is qarina and what is ilal?
Oh, qarina are just things that point to you to tell you what the nature of a hukum is. So, for example, let's just say anything linked to shaitan, Iblis,
in the
that's
ayah.
a qarina qawiyya. That's a qarina wadiha that something's haram, it's unlawful. So إنما الخمر والميسر وأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان. How do we know this is haram? How do we know? Well, there's two qarinas at least in the ayah. Rijis, the lafz, rijis, filth. In fact, there's three in the ayah. Rijis, and then you got min amal shaitan. That tells us,
it's done.
It's haram as well. And then fajtanibu, stay well away from it. So this is original haram, isn't it? As they say, this is original haram. This is the worst. So you got three qarinas telling you, three indications saying it's haram. You got rijis, you got shaitan's amal, and stay well away from it. Another example, let's say, so this is a qarina to say something's unlawful. If something is conditional to enter Jannah, for example, then we know that is a qarina that says this is an obligation. Because if it's conditioned to enter Jannah, then you have to do it. Yeah? Okay. You have to do it. So, for example, in the ayah in Surah Al-Nazi'ah, من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى. So Allah has placed Jannah conditional on controlling the nafs. So controlling the nafs is not optional. Why? Because the Jannah is conditional on it. Yeah. And then obviously the ayah continues, isn't it? أما من طغى وآثر حياة الدنيا فإن جحيم هي. Slipping, it's late.
But
sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, go on.
No, you're saying.
I'm looking at the just the ayat. So now, those are the examples of indicators, and if you can, one or two examples of ilal. How do we understand that? Causes, I know it means the reason and effective cause behind the ruling. So what would be an example of this?
on illah, like a
Because
cause,
they
an
have a
illah
whole
of a hukum.
ilm al-ilal.
Yes.
Things
That
like
is going into obviously now qiyas and trying to know how to identify the illah. That itself is an entire discipline, isn't it? And there's
yes.
detailed ahkam about that for an analogy. Now, all that we need to know about qiyas illah is how do we identify the illah? You see, because we can't use illah aqliyah, can't use our minds to determine whether a law has been legislated for some reason or not. You can see, can't use our minds to decide why a law has been
Established.
legislated. We have to find out what the illah is through certain principles. And this is where, the ulama in usul laid down the principles of how to identify an illah. You see, and this is a very detailed. I mean, this is going to require like a separate study.
No, I understand. But
But what I'm saying is, it's very, very important to know it because we don't want to confuse. We don't want to misidentify an illah and think it's an illah there. We don't want to put our minds. We don't want our minds to plant an illah into something, into a hukum when it's not there.
So
We're not allowed.
Doesn't that bring another question, Sheikh? That okay, I mean, with such detailed principles, it's very hard to go. It's hard to make mistakes. The principles, the way they have, that surround deriving a hukum, it's very hard to make mistakes. But when it comes to maqasid, that kind of, I may be wrong. That's why I'm asking here. I mean, that kind of rigidity, isn't it necessary, or is it being developed?
You got to understand why the classical ulama. And this is where it's going to open up, sort of maybe going into critique of maqasid. The classical ulama wanted to remove the element of hawa from as much as they can.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the hukum of Allah Azza wa Jal here, the hukum shari'i. So you need to eliminate as much doubt as you can and as much input from your nafs as much as you can. You have to, because you're deriving the hukum of Allah Azza wa Jal. So you can't be wishy-washy, can't be vague. So you have to be precise in what you're drilling down to. So the hukum exists. It's not invented via a mujtahid. The mujtahid doesn't make up a hukum. He discovers the hukum that's already there by the tools that he uses. And I always use the analogy of drilling down.
No, hold on.
You've got a drilling machine.
Hold on. So when it comes to principle, is the principle derived from... so the principle is not derived from his hawa. It's derived from the hukum, or it's derived from the language.
Are you talking about the usul?
Yes.
Yeah, the usul is derived from the Arabic language and inference principles. So he's not sat down but these principles have to be relevant to the text you're reading, right? So when you're reading a literary text, you're going to need literary principles to read the text, right? Similarly, because the Quran is Arabic language, hadith and Nabawi Sharifa are in Arabic language, you need to have valid principles of the Arabic language, grammatical rules, whatever the grammar allows you to derive or not derive, and inference principles. What follows from what? Yeah, what follows from what? If you don't have that properly, then you may misunderstand the text that you're reading because you haven't got the correct principles to read it. I can't use that's the whole point of usul. If you don't have the right tools to read the text that you're reading, then you're going to misread it. I can't apply English grammar rules to Arabic, can I?
Of course not. Yeah.
It's not going to work. Someone will think I'm mad if I'm trying to interpret grammatical, if I'm trying to get grammatical points from the Quran and Hadith using English grammar rules. Because similarly, is the Maqasid then sufficient to help us read the text to derive hukum shari'i? Does it eliminate, this is where the criterion I think comes in, does it eliminate hawa, subjectivity as much as we can? Or does it increase the scope of subjectivity? Does it increase the scope of vagueness? Does it increase the scope of latitude where it's not there? Does it increase the scope of bringing more element of the human into it? Is it bringing more role for consequence in law? You can see, you're looking at the outcomes, then you're judging whether something halal or haram based on the outcome. So we want to eliminate as much consequentialism as we can, as much sort of utilitarianism type thing as we can. We want to eliminate as much subjectivity as we can, and we want to create as much congruence with reading the text as we can. So congruence, is my usul mutabiq with the nas I'm reading? Right?
I'm so sorry, Sheikh. How do they do this? Do you have an example, if you don't mind?
The ulama. So
Yeah.
open up any book of usul. Like, for example, when you look at am khas,
Right,
general specific,
right.
mutlaq, absolute, muqayyad, restricted.
Mm.
You look at any of these sort of, principles of language. Is it based on the English language or not? Or based on the Arabic language? Based on the Arabic language.
Of course.
How it's been understood, both in the Quran, according to
I
the
see
grammarians and so
I
on.
got you.
But you can't now bring English grammatical rules and say, right, let's look at generality and specification according to English and try and read the Quran with it. That's what I mean by a congruent set of principles. The principles you have must be relevant to the nas you're reading. You can't bring a foreign set of principles that's got nothing to do with Kitab and Sunnah, nothing to do with Arabic.
Yeah, because
try and read the
what
Quran.
I heard, I had a debate going on. I mean, discussion with one of the. I mean, one of the. I guess it was a professor, but he brought in concepts such as spirit of the law. I mean,
Spirit of the law.
Yes. Does that play any role in Maqasid? Or is that's he's using the way law is derived from the Constitution and trying to impose it on Sharia?
Well, it depends what that author means by the spirit of the law. What do they mean by, the spirit of the law? I don't think Maqasid proponents would want to equate the Maqasid of Sharia as the spirit of the law, because we just gave the definitions of what they are.
Right.
The objectives that the Sharia seeks to realize, even if the Sharia even if it doesn't realize practically, it may or may not. So the spirit of the law, it depends what the person means by it. But we don't have that concept or spirit of the law generally in usul al-fiqh. There isn't one that I know of anyway. There's no spirit, whatever that might mean. So the letter of the law is to follow, like in Western law, letter of the law.
Yeah, this idea of the letter of the law. I mean, and literally the person was taking those principles and applying that to this.
Yeah, because
Maqasid.
in Western law, the spirit of the law is considered to be the intent or the intention of why the law was enforced.
Right.
What was the reason behind? What was the aim behind why you enforced the law? So that's why I can see why some people may equate spirit of the law with the Maqasid.
Like when it comes down to qisas, and for instance, they were saying, "Oh, this doesn't mean qisas," and that's where I was wondering how can it get dangerous, because what they were saying, "Oh, it doesn't mean cut the hand; it just means that it's that bad, so don't do it, don't steal." So can somebody play that game with Maqasid? So according to what I understand from you now, which is very clear, is that they have to stay within the boundaries of Islamic law. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, for example, this is what I was saying about earlier, that does your usul unravel the law, i.e. does it unwind it and dissolve it, undermine it, or not? So if your principles, if laws can't be changed in the Sharia, right? So let's just say the hudud, for example. If your hermeneutics is starting to unravel that area of law, then one needs to think, okay, what is it about my principles that's making me undermine these laws? If my approach, my theory, or my usul starts to make like Salah not obligatory anymore, or saying Hajj doesn't have to be this way, or Ramadan, not necessary. If my principles are taking me that direction, then this is a indication that maybe there's a problem in the principle itself. It's unraveling the law. It's unwinding, aspects of the law.
Wouldn't that the scholar would know that? No, Sheikh, right? I mean, the scholar would know
Absolutely.
that this is happening just because he knows the language. It cannot be done.
What do you mean? Like, if he sees that his usul is making him...
Right, for instance, I mean, it's just out there, but let's say example that, you cannot pray anymore. 5 times is not, you can only pray, 2 is enough.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're remembering God, for instance, I'm giving you an example.
Yeah.
Somebody does that. But the
Then
language
we would say
itself...
there's something funny here.
So the language itself
Something
would not
seriously wrong
allow
here.
him to do that, because it says, no, that's a restrictive issue.
That's right. So we need to see that if your usul is taking you to that conclusion, then you got to look at the usul again. And see, if your usul, your interpretations, your principles is taking you to something that is denying the qat'iyat, the established matters of the deen, then you got to look at that again.
Okay.
Why
so
is
that's
that
the boundary
Why is usul
under which we
leading
can
you
work.
to unravel the Sharia? Yeah. So that's why we have to see, does Maqasid, those who are adopting Maqasid al-Sharia in a rigid way, in a very exclusivist way, where is their ijtihad taking them? You see, where is it leading them to? So it's a bigger debate. Look, I'm not saying that there's no place for the Maqasid al-Sharia. There are. Normally, what you'd find in a Maqasid approach is the method of Maqasid Sharia generally, or one general method is you look at new emergent issues, what we call nazila, and what you do is you have a 3-step process. The first step is you need to understand, a proper understanding of the reality you're seeking an ijtihad for or a solution for. You have to have correct tasawwur or conceptualization of the problem. And you need to know what the actual problem is to identify what the nazila is. Second, after you've identified the problem, you then need to go and look at, this is where your usul comes in now. You then go to try and understand Kitab and Sunnah, everything related to Quran and Hadith about the mas'ala you're trying to find the solution for. And here depends on who the person is, how much of maqasid they're using or how little of maqasid they're using. Once you've done the second step, which is the istidlal, you're trying to derive a hukum now from the texts. The third aspect is, once you derive the hukum, is the application, the tatbiq. Yeah? How do you apply the hukum sharia? And this is where people have different views about wasail and different means of implementing the hukum. And you have to consider the time and place and so on. So the 3 steps of the Maqasid approach generally is identify what the new issue is, the problem is, try and work out what the ruling is from the Kitab and Sunnah, and using your principles. Here you can bring in Maqasid and all of that. And then once you've derived a ruling, how do you apply it? How do you apply it?
So
step 2 and 3. Go on.
Go ahead, continue.
I was going to say step 2 and 3 is where there's a big difference of opinion amongst scholars of the Maqasid, where you gather all the evidences, verses of the Quran and Hadith related to the mas'ala that you're trying to find the hukum for, and then you seek to understand it. And you understand it by trying to extract the maqasid. You're trying to extract the maqasid. That's where you try and find the maqasid from the texts related to the issue you're trying to solve the problem for. And then you apply it. And maybe if I give an example, you see it in action. So for example, I'm just giving an example, because when I was thinking about it, it was during Christmas time, and like Sheikh Yusuf Qardawi's fatwa on like Christmas greetings. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm not picking on Sheikh Qardawi, rahmatullah alayhi. I'm just saying that this is a good example of maqasid. So the Tahniyatu Ahl al-Kitab bi a'yadihim, there's a fatwa that he wrote. Can we greet Christians on their can we give them Christmas greetings? Because many people said, obviously giving Christmas greetings is haram. Now, the Sheikh's reasoning, rahimahullah, the Sheikh's reasoning is that, non-Muslims are very, they're very peaceful, loving people. They're not belligerent. Nowadays, Muslims living amongst non-Muslims means that they have a different relationship, a relationship with dependency and intimacy with non-Muslims. They have an intimacy with non-Muslims. They're a kind of, you mentioned they're a kind of captive. They're in captivity of their kindness. Yeah. And so what should Muslims do when this season comes? And the Sheikh said that we should be gentle with the non-Muslims. We should return their greetings, exchange gifts, be kind, be caring, be considerate, and he doesn't see any harm in congratulating the people on their holidays. So if you have good neighbors, families, if you have a collegial relationship with others, you should return that seasonal, that holiday festivity and spirit. Why? Because he talks about the maqsad of the Shari'ah. One of the maqsad of the Shari'ah is fairness and good relations with non-believers. Fairness. And what's the wasila? What's the way in which you realize that maqasid of the Shari'ah? Or you realize it through the practical the means of seasonal gifts, exchanging gifts,
Sheikh,
giving greetings, maintaining visits. Yeah.
But then where does compromise come in here? Because, what he's saying is complete compromise. For us, then if we would become complete like kuffar after a while.
Well, this is what I said to you at the beginning. How do you determine whether your usul is robust? One of the conditions is, does it lead you to clash with things that we know for certain in the religion? Does it? But here, his evidence, there's a longer fatwa, and it has evidences in it. I'm just, maybe I've done a bit injustice to the Sheikh, but the core is the maqsad, one of the maqsad of the Sharia, the Sheikh says in the fatwa, is fairness, being fair to people.
Fair is, but there's a difference between fairness and
return the greeting. Huh?
There's a difference between being fair and what is truth.
Yeah. But this is what I'm saying to you. So the question now becomes right, well, if that's the thinking guiding your reasoning, then that's the conclusion you're going to be led to.
This is when you can go wrong.
Well, the important thing is the idea of wasila as well here for the maqasid, because the wasila, the means by which you practically implement the maqsad that you've understood now, you've extracted, that could differ. Remember I said I'm trying to boil it down to 3 steps in the maqasid approach. 1, understand what the new problem is, the nazila. 2, understand what the maqsad of what is the aim of the Sharia you're looking for. You need to find that, extract that. Other things you need to find as well, but you're aiming for the Sharia aim or the purpose. And then you need the wasila, the means by which you're going to implement the hukum. That could vary and change. So in this fatwa of Sheikh Al-Qardawi, rahmatullah alayh, his nazila is, what's the nazila? The nazila is greeting non-Muslims, during Christmas, right? You're living as a Muslim in a non-Muslim country. Can you give Christmas greetings? That's the nazila. What's the maqsad he's inferred from the hadith and ayat that he's done istidlal of in the fatwa? It's the maqsad of fairness and good relations. Yeah? What's his wasila? What's the practical means by which he's implementing that hukum? Exchanging gifts. Tahni'ah. giving greetings, mutual greetings. Can you see?
No, I'm seeing it. I'm surprised, but I'm seeing it. But Sheikh, do you agree with this? You don't agree with this. I mean,
it's difficult. This is what I'm saying. Because I'm not a Maqasidi, you see. I'm not. Though I think the Mujtahid should know the Maqasid al-Shari'ah without a doubt. The Mujtahid Mutlaq must know the Maqasid al-Shari'ah.
Yeah, but the
He
thing
must
in
know
this
the
case,
overall
Sheikh, I
parameters
mean,
of Sharia.
you were saying
A source of law.
greeting of Christmas. This is, we know that this has an idea behind
My
it, which
opinion
is
is
kufr.
Allah knows best. This is not. Obviously, I'm not a faqih. I'm not giving fatwa, but I'm not, in any way the stature of anyway near Sheikh Yusuf al-Qardawi, rahmatullah alayhi. But it's not a hukum I follow.
But you're saying that how okay, so I see what you're saying. You're saying that this is how the I mean, when they look at principles, these are some of the principles that are utilized. But if you see that it is going not according to the Sharia, I mean, like we said, I mean, it's making Salah no longer fard. And now you will have to go back and look at your principles, your usul again.
I'm saying that there are several criteria, conditions. Several things you need to look at to see is your usul robust, and is it an usul that is to be adopted. Remember, the door of usul al-fiqh is not closed. No one can shut the door of usul. People can come with the usul. The usul must be based on the language of the text that you're studying, i.e. the Quran and Hadith al-Sharif. So it's got to be based on the Arabic language, because that's the language congruent, commensurate with, related to the text you're studying. Does your usul unravel the Sharia laws? Does it come to make them, repeal them, abolish them, undermine them? Does your usul, and so on and so on, does it have these negative consequences? You need to have a look at it. There are about 6 or 7. I can't remember the top of my head. Sorry, I know it's late. What these are.
This is so. I mean, it does say. I mean, the topic requires an elaboration that is not suitable for a fatwa. I mean, you can refer to. I mean, you've said it. I saw your readings, and that obviously this is a very broad subject, which is still in research, which is still in works. But subhanallah, so which means even where it is today, the study, it already has certain principles that are being utilized already in the general, and I guess in the ulama class.
Yeah. I mean, the other aspect, if you want to add, like for the Maqasid approach. So just so if anyone's watching later on, sorry about the rambling and being all over.
No, it's just that before you go there, my only issue was that on the issue of Christmas, because I just don't want the people to think that I support this.
No, that's what I was going to say. I wanted to just clarify.
Please clarify that, because I don't want anybody to think that all of a sudden Brother Shiraz is saying it's okay to say Merry Christmas or A'udhu Billah, things like that.
No, I'm not endorsing that shit. Well, what I want the viewers, just to give another example of Maqasid in action, right? And when I'm giving these examples, I'm not saying in any way, look at how, these aren't scholars. Astaghfirullah. I don't want anyone to make that inference. Who am I, first of all? I'm just a lowly student who's trying to bring out some interest in usul, and I'm so glad that we're doing this episode.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. It really is. And it takes a lot of, it's
amazing.
Meticulous.
Yes. SubhanAllah, it's one of the pride, the fakhr of our civilization, our intellectual civilization. It's SubhanAllah, only in this deen, do we have this usul. But just to give another example, so just to move away, I don't want people to fixate on the Christmas example. It's just an example I brought.
You kill me, Sheikh. The whole Islamic Oasis will be finished.
No. It was just winter time. I was thinking about it, so I thought, let me bring it in, because it's a question everyone asks. But here is another one. Here's another one. For example, Sheikh Nasir al-Sa'di, rahimahullah, the great Saudi sheikh. He's got his fatwa collection, al-Fatawa al-Sa'diyah. You find in the Kitab al-Janaiz, and Su'al al-Tasi' or something like that, remember? He was asked about, are we allowed to do, the question was about human transplantation, in a human body. Is it allowed? With the consent of the person. So let's say you're taking an organ from someone, and the person gives consent that you can take the organ. Is it permissible to do that transplant?
You're talking about kidney here.
So
only.
Yeah, so the su'al is something like هل يجوز أخذ جزء من جسد الإنسان وتركيبه في إنسان آخر مضطر إليه بالرضا من أخذ منه something like that. Anyway, the fatwa is about human transplanting an organ into another human being when the donor gives consent. Now the sheikh gives a lovely sort of fiqh analysis, but in the end he concludes that one of the Sharia aims is hifsun nafs. Remember that? Remember we mentioned
protection
one of the
itself.
the protection, saving life, protection of life. So he says one of the aims of Sharia is protecting life, and a practical wasila, practical means by which we can save life nowadays, is through transplantation, even though it involves mutilating the body, which you're not allowed to do in Sharia, right? You're not allowed to mutilate the body.
But you're talking about now the person is the person dead or no? He's consenting to be
alive as well. Yeah.
Alive, okay. Yeah. So in this, but that's is this limited to just an organ?
Even even the fatwa can be extended to when it's dead. But let's just take it as it is.
Sure, because you're looking at consent. That's why. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So even if it can be stretched to when you die, which is what the fatwa allows as well, if consent has already been recorded. Yeah. Anyway. So he says that one of the maqsad of the Sharia is to save life, hifsun nafs. The wasila, the practical means by which that maqsad is realized, is transplantation, organ transplantation. But that involves mutilating the body, which you're not allowed to do. Now, how does he get around that with the fatwa? He says, right, normally you're not allowed to do that. You can't surgically mutilate a body. You're not allowed to. But the justification here is the maslahah outweighs the mafsada. The benefit outweighs the harm. The benefit outweighs the harm. So, on that basis, and the absence of an illah, but
so that's important. Absence of an illah. There is Here, do you mean absence of an illah here mean you don't have a dalil because you don't have a clear text?
Yeah, well, he says the original illah for why it was haram for scholars before, this is what he says, is that
it would cause harm.
Because they couldn't do operations the way we do today. Now, the Sheikh says, rahimahullah, we've got operations that can be done in very advanced ways. So the illah is no longer there. For the original ruling that's haram is no longer there. But that's not his main reason, really. The main reason is, what's the maqsad of the Sharia? Save life. What's the wasila? What's the practical means by achieving it? Transplantation. And then let's weigh the maslahah, the benefit, and the mafsada, the harms. On sort of weighing the benefits, the pros and cons, the benefits and harms, the maslahah seems to override the mafsada.
Okay, so Sheikh, the final question here. In this case, when you look at maslahah and mafsada, both are first in the da'ira or in the circle of the Sharia. Right? So it's not my hawa that is making that distinction there.
No, it shouldn't be. No. Not in this fatwa anyway. But
it shouldn't
there's
be.
a possibility of subjectivity coming in.
I'm sorry, say that again.
There's a possibility of subjectivity coming in, but not in this fatwa. From what I can remember, Sheikh Sa'adi's fatwa doesn't make a random comparison, weighing like that.
When you're saying subjectivity here, I mean, I guess I'm saying hawa meaning
Subjectivity.
Yes, but also my own interest.
Yeah, no, that can't be. But this is the danger. This is the danger,
Right.
you see.
So when you say
That's
subjective,
what
you mean
ulama
that it
wanted
could
to
be
eliminate
general.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Man, Jazakallah, Sheikh Khani, this is
No.
this is awesome.
This is a wonderful topic.
Yes.
I don't want anyone to think that because we've been rambling, I've been rambling on
No,
and on and on.
Jazakallah khair.
I think-
I as I said, I just didn't want to get shut down by, because I am all of a sudden saying, no. It's just because there's a lot of students watching this, and there's a lot of people that they know our stance are very clear. That's why I was making sure.
No. I want to make it clear. No, Sheikh. The example that I used was just to show you the thinking.
Aywa. Yes.
I want people to we got to know the thinking.
The broadness of the usul, the principles that could be.
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah. But the only thing was that I just wanted to, inshallah, maybe we need to do this more, a bit more detailed. Although you did, if the person watches this from the beginning till the end will know, okay, so even for whether it's broad or whether it's, for both
narrow.
Or narrow, it's, there are principles that are guiding both. So
Yes.
so that's the issue.
All
right.
No one should get the impression that Maqasid Shari'ah today, those who subscribe to a theory of Maqasid, are just randomly making up hukum. No. I gave you two fatwas examples that are fatawa, it's reasoned out, but the Maqasid is there in the reasoning. Now, we can accept it or reject it. I'm not saying, I'm just getting you to give people to see how it's practically being applied. The three stages that I talked about. What's the issue, the istidlal, and then the application.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Jazakallah
No,
khair,
we
Sheikh.
can. It's an important topic. SubhanAllah, I'm glad. We got a chance to describe just a little bit of it.
Yes. I mean, because this is a whole. This is developing into a whole science.
I'm telling you, when you read the literature, it's
wow.
It's like a huge new science. Yeah.
Subhanallah. Sheikh, no, okay, never mind, because this will come into a whole different subject again, and I don't want to go there because we've been going at it for over almost hour and 15 minutes. So,
no worries.
But Sheikh, the next time though, we have to discuss your Arba'in of Shah Waliullah Dahlavi. Yeah, I mean, we need to do this. I'm wondering, just the way the man writes, I don't know how you did it, but
No, that's just sort of hadith. But I mean, I wouldn't even. I wish. Allah bless me with the tawfiq to study the books of Shasa, but I haven't had a chance to study in detail the way I would like to. There are expert ulama out there who are sitting quietly just teaching it, and no one knows about them.
SubhanAllah. Send us their information.
Amazing. Huh?
Send us their information. We would love to have them on the show.
Of course.
Inshallah.
Of course.
All right, Sheikh.
And I'll send you the handout if I haven't already for maybe today. So if it helps, students, if it helps, ulama won't probably benefit from it, but anyone who's interested in what we discussed today, can make reference to the handout.
I mean, you're talking about the PDF you sent, because I was just going all over the place.
Yeah.
Subhanallah. Khalas. No, we are going to actually. I was teaching. Now I know how to teach it. Subhanallah. When I'm teaching it, I'm going to utilize it. But now I know, what I was doing right or wrong. Inshallah.
No, inshallah. So I'll send the updated one, and then it should be all right.
Khalas. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to give you and increase you in knowledge and tawfiq, and make you guys useful and beneficial for the ummah, Sheikh. We need ulama, and we need people who speak the haqq and continuously do the work that needs to be done. I mean, this type of intellectual work, sometimes I feel that it's unfortunate that the Muslim youth in general don't get to see this, the way this deen is in this detail. Usually, we're just stuck with just 5 principles of Islam, or 5, and that's all we think Islam is. Subhanallah. The intellectual capacity is not even.
No, we're not even touching it. لا, I'm just saying, Allah give. وفقكم الله. Allah يحفظكم ويرعاكم جميعا. You, your team, everyone. Allah protect you. Keep the work
And
going.
you guys.
I mean, I think, Islamic Oasis is alhamdulillah fast become a hub that nurtures wonderful discussions, knowledge, outreach. So whatever it is doing is working.
Wallah, it feels so good to hear that from someone like you, Sheikh. Really, it gives me more. It gives us more. That means we're doing something right, inshallah, ya Rabb.
No, wallah. It's I say this not because of any, honestly. So keep it up, and inshallah, we'll meet again.
Oh yeah, the Arba'in of Shab al-Ullah, we're going for it, Sheikh. Just let me know. Inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah.
For the rest of you brothers and sisters, this is important, brothers and sisters. That look, please watch this. These are the type of. I mean, unfortunately, we don't get to study Islam this way in our regular lives. But subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us access where we can sit down with somebody like Dr. Chowdhury all the way across the world in Britain and bring them on the show and be able to discuss these things, brothers and sisters. So this is a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how many favors of Allah are we going to deny? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And one of those things is to deny the kind of knowledge that is available and the kind of ulama that are available. And if you seek it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it. So with that, Jazakumullahu khairan. And we'll see you guys in the next show, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح